The morning began with a nervous energy that Daniel could feel in every muscle of his body. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day. Months of rejection letters, months of sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer he could hold out before everything collapsed, all came down to this moment. His dream job, a position that didn't just promise a paycheck but a future, stability, a chance to finally take care of his mother the way she had always taken care of him. She had pawned the last piece of her jewelry to buy him this suit, neatly pressed, though it barely fit his broad shoulders. He glanced at himself in the mirror one last time before stepping out of their small apartment, whispering, "This is it, Mom. I won't let you down." The streets were buzzing with activity. Vendors shouting, cars honking, people rushing about their daily lives. But for Daniel, everything felt like background noise. He clutched the folder in his hand like it contained not just his resume, but his very soul. He checked his watch 15 minutes until the interview. He knew he had to move quickly, but just as he pushed through the crowd, weaving past briefcases and coffee cups, something unusual caught his eye. A body crumpled near the edge of the sidewalk. At first, he thought it was just someone who had tripped. People slowed down, some craned their necks, but nobody stopped. Then Daniel saw him clearly. An elderly man, his face pale, his chest rising and falling unevenly, a trembling hand reaching into the void. Daniel froze. His pulse quickened, his breathing shallow. He knew what this meant. His brain screamed, "You can't stop. You don't have time." His interview, his future, everything he had worked for. It was all slipping through his fingers with every second he wasted. He could hear his mother's voice reminding him of what was at stake, but his heart whispered something different, quieter but stronger. It told him this man might not have another second left. Daniel's hand tightened around his folder until his knuckles turned white. He took one last desperate look at his watch, then dropped the folder to the ground, knelt beside the stranger and shouted for help. The world blurred around him. At that moment, there was no interview. There was no dream job. There was only humanity, fragile and gasping for air at his feet. The seconds stretched into eternity as Daniel crouched beside the man. His suit pants pressed into the gritty pavement, his heart hammering like a war drum. "Sir, can you hear me?" he called, voice trembling. The man's eyelids fluttered, lips barely moving, but no sound came out. Panic surged through Daniel's chest. He looked up at the crowd, desperate. "Please, somebody call an ambulance," he shouted. People glanced, whispered, but their feet stayed planted. Fury boiled inside him. How could they just stand there, spectators to a man suffering? He slipped a hand under the man's head, carefully tilting him to his side. The man groaned faintly, chest struggling with each rise and fall. Daniel removed his jacket, folded it, and slid it under the man's head. Sweat trickled down his temple, not just from exertion, but from the awareness that every passing minute was pulling him further from his interview. He pictured the boardroom. Polished tables, sharp suits, a panel waiting, his empty chair glaring at them like a betrayal. They would frown, move to the next candidate, and by the time Daniel arrived, if he ever did, it would all be over. His dream job would vanish, and his mother's sacrifices with it. His breathing quickened. A cruel voice whispered, "You can still leave. Nobody will blame you. This isn't your responsibility." His hand shook as he reached for his folder, torn between his future and this stranger's life. But when he looked down again, when he saw the fear in the man's eyes, the fragile tremor of his lips, Daniel knew the truth. His future meant nothing if he abandoned his humanity. "Stay with me, sir. Stay with me," he urged, clutching the man's hand tightly. At last, a young teenager in the crowd stepped forward, phone in hand. "Ambulance is on the way," the boy shouted. Relief surged through Daniel, but it was fleeting. Sirens were minutes away, and minutes could mean everything. He leaned closer, speaking softly into the man's ear. "You're not alone. I'm here. Just hold on." His own tears blurred his vision as his watch ticked mercilessly toward the hour. Daniel had no idea if his career, his future, was already gone. But he stayed. because leaving would mean losing something far greater, himself. When the ambulance finally pulled up, Daniel felt his entire body sag with exhaustion. The paramedics rushed in, lifting the man onto a stretcher. One of them turned to him and said, "If you hadn't acted when you did, he might not have made it." The words should have filled him with pride, but all Daniel could think about was the glass building across town, the building where his future had just slipped through his fingers. He picked up his folder, edges now crumpled and dirty, and ran. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he pushed through. By the time he arrived, the building lobby was empty. The receptionist shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, sir. The panel has left." His heart broke silently in his chest. He had sacrificed everything, and in return, all he had was the memory of a man's frightened eyes. For days, Daniel walked in silence, replaying the choice. He wondered if he had been foolish, if kindness had cost him the life he and his mother so desperately needed. But a week later, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Is this Daniel? We'd like to reschedule your interview." The panel insisted. Confused, Daniel asked why. The voice hesitated, then said, "One of our senior board members had a medical emergency last week. He told us a young man saved his life before rushing here for an interview. That young man was you." Daniel dropped into his chair, tears flooding his eyes. The very act that had seemed to destroy his future had, in fact, safeguarded it. He walked into that rescheduled interview not just with a resume in his hand, but with the weight of his choices behind him. Because sometimes, the doors that close are only making way for the ones that truly matter. And sometimes saving a stranger's life ends up saving your own.